Well, here we are, folks. 2025 has come to an end. For what it's worth, I had a hell of a time on here. I think I've experienced a good amount of progress with me as a content creator. Not 100%. I think there were some things I still need to work on. I need to manage my time better, which is something I have never been good at. Experienced a lot of life changes, and I had to come to a realization about certain things and certain people that I thought were a certain way, but maybe not entirely, or definitely not the ways I was hoping they were. Different discussion for another time. But my main goal with 2025, and I think I've managed to get it mostly right, is stay as relevant as possible on here with entertainment and pop culture and the like. I made an effort to see more movies this year, and maybe I didn't get to see absolutely everything that I wanted to see. For time, money, and interest reasons, I wasn't able to. Even so, I attempted to expand my horizons for all of you. And I realize this list is probably going to be too mainstream, too obvious, and so on and so forth for some people. But like I said, these are the best movies of the year, that I saw. So take from that what you will. Starting off with the honorable mentions: Ballerina, The Long Walk, and One Battle After Another. And to go to number 10, 28 Years Later. I realize that this is going to be a controversial pick for some people, and some of the choices on here may or may not be controversial depending on how I rank them. Here's the thing. As a newcomer to the 28 Days Later series, I got a lot out of this one, with the emotional weight that Spike has to go through with caring for his mother and finding this unlikely mentor that he needs in Ralph Fiennes' character. I found myself very invested in what was happening. But from a technical level, from the way Danny Boyle helms some of these scenes and sequences, it all feels like an actual place. And my mind is still kind of blown with how this was all done on an iPhone camera most of the time, which thankfully does not come off as a gimmick, like you're watching some clean, pristine looking type of world. This is the apocalypse, so it's bound to have some sort of graininess to it. I wouldn't call this the best in the series though. I'd still give that title to the first one, but for all the reasons I stated and as a newcomer to the series, I quite like this one. The best way I could sum up my thoughts in regards to how it wraps up.
This is very much as I imagined it to be. Aside from this rattan piece, which seems oddly out of place.
Okay, all jokes aside, I had a really good time with this one, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the sequel has to offer pretty soon. Number 9. Warfare, directed by Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, a real-life Navy SEAL veteran who fought in this particular situation in Iraq, which brings a huge amount of needed realism to this entire picture, all about the event and how horrifying it was to be stuck in the middle of this situation. The film really benefits from having a mostly slew of unknown people to slightly known people, like with Will Poulter probably being the most recognizable. And given Ray Mendoza's personal connection to the situation, can you really name any other war film that has a veteran directing certain scenes like this? I can't. While the film doesn't have much of a story arc, there are little setups and payoffs that are given, very similar to Peter Berg's Lone Survivor. I think the movie manages to really get the job done in showing you just how horrific this whole situation is. And not only that, but it shows the end result of how it actually wasn't that much of a victory anyway. Alex Garland should direct more war films. If last year's Civil War is any indication, he should be the go-to guy for that genre. On to number 8, a movie that I did not review on here: How to Train Your Dragon. As far as my history with this series, I've only seen the original animated film on Amazon, which was many, many years ago. I haven't seen the rest of the animated series, but I feel like I'm going to have to do my homework at some point before we get the sequel in 2027, which is just about a year from now or so. Oh boy. But while I did like the first movie, I decided on a whim to give this one a try, and for what it's worth, I had a good time with this. It's not exactly the most groundbreaking or original, but I think it's done very tastefully, and it's a very effective way of telling that original story. And you add that on top of the original director from the animated film also directed this one, while also writing the screenplay. If this were done by anybody else, my bet is that it probably wouldn't have gotten the same type of quality. And even in live action form, this looks and feels like the original How to Train Your Dragon. It's a lot more than I can say for certain live action remakes out there. Number 7. F1. Similar to How to Train Your Dragon, where this is done very tastefully and effectively, but it also has a different spin on the genre as well. Well, in regards to racing and passing the torch from one generation to the other. Brad Pitt's character, Sonny, gets a moment to redeem himself and experience the joy and height of fame that he didn't get to experience in his prime, as opposed to the young student who would get a chance to do the same thing. I also think there's something very inspiring in here. No matter how old you are, you're never too old to chase after your dreams. On top of that, you have to add some really thrilling racing sequences in here, which you have Joseph Kosinski behind the camera, similar to what he did with Top Gun Maverick. There's a certain visceral excitement and intensity brought to the entire picture. Come to think of it, looking at my 4K collection, which isn't really that big right now, I don't have this on 4K yet. What's the matter with me? Number 6, Eternity. A very unique spin on the rom-com genre, but also presenting some interesting questions on what would you do if you had the chance to choose your eternity. This includes some of the best work I've ever seen from Elizabeth Olsen, along with Miles Teller. Callum Turner, I was never familiar with his work up until now, but I like seeing the contrast between the two, and I think that it's easier, in my vantage point anyway, to understand why she would want to be with her first husband, but then she also might want to spend the rest of her eternity with her husband that she's built a life with for so many years. I just hope that there's a way to have a little bit of both when my time comes and not just stay in one eternity forever, because honestly, that sounds kind of boring. Please don't do that. What am I doing? I'm trying to have a little pep talk with God, just bear with me. And while at a certain point I could kind of tell where it was going, like with F1 and How to Train Your Dragon, I thought it managed to get it across very effectively. This is also brought to us by A24, who brought us Civil War and Warfare. It's actually making me want to check out more of their stuff. Now we're in the top 5, with Thunderbolts, or the New Avengers according to the asterisk. You know what, for what it's worth, I think this is something that the MCU desperately needed at the time, which wasn't really that long ago, but it was the first sign on my end anyway of a start of a course correction for the MCU. Taking all these characters that we've seen in previous movies or shows as a way to bridge the gap towards a better future for this universe. I think we could have had a little more time with certain characters, but what we see with Yelena and Sentry, I thought it was exactly the emotional punch that we needed in all the right ways. And I can easily see this film being featured in certain mental health discussions in the future, because what they tackle on here with depression, loneliness, and despair, it's not something that we haven't seen before, but I found it to be very powerfully done in the way it's mixed into the plot here, and it would behoove the Marvel Universe to keep Florence Pugh around since she's a total poser. Because underneath all that sassiness and female bravado, she clearly has a lot of heart. The best scene for me is when she pours her heart out to her father, the Red Guardian, and he responds with saying that he doesn't see her mistakes. I actually used that clip in my church group not that long ago.
Okay, that was really good.
Yeah, you're right. Just like Thunderbolts. It was really good. Okay, number 4. Actually, I'm rolling up my sleeves on this one because some of these choices, I think they could use a good defense in court. Because some people on here feel the need to rip them to shreds. Number 4 is Wicked for Good. You want to roll your eyes at me or just screech at me with horror and disdain for saying that? You go right ahead. Now, I'm not saying for one second, if you were disappointed by this, if you expected more out of this, you have the right to feel however you want to. But unlike certain YouTubers on here, I didn't have too high expectations. Like with any movie, I try to go into something watching it for what it is. And to follow up on a movie like the first Wicked, that was going to be a tall order to follow. Especially when you have a closing number like Defying Gravity. Odds are you're probably going to flop miserably if you try to reach that ballpark again. Are there things in this movie you could complain about? Of course there are. I think there's certain things that don't really get enough time as they should, but I like that this movie doesn't try to top its predecessor. It's appropriately somber and bittersweet. The standout musical numbers for me are No Good Deed and For Good. I'm also relieved that I didn't see the play beforehand because the way certain things play out caught me for a loop, particularly with the last few minutes. If you know, you know. I don't like using that phrase, but in this case, I think it's appropriate. If anything, you got Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande carrying the entire picture. If you try to argue with me that they're terrible, good luck. And to my surprise and relief, this movie actually sold me on Ariana Grande's Galinda, because in the first one, I found her to be kind of annoying and insufferable, but not in the case with this one. I think with the way we see things from her perspective, it helps me understand her a lot better. One last thing, were there some things in here that were kind of obvious from the get-go with the first one? Yeah, probably. But unlike certain people, once again, I didn't find them to be obnoxious. Just me, though. And with these two films being released a year apart from each other, it's a cinematic experience that I'm going to remember fondly for the rest of my life. Number 3. Fantastic Four First Steps. It was a long, hard road to get us an actually good Fantastic Four movie, and all I had to do was put it in the hands of the MCU, the Marvel Studios brand. I don't really like to compare this with other entries in the MCU, but if I had to, would I say that it's on the same level as Winter Soldier or the first Iron Man? Well, probably not. But this is a very quiet look at a family drama and how this family has to figure out a way to figure out what's right and what's best for their family. Maybe some of the way the Fantastic Four handles the defeat of Galactus is a little too cockamamie of a plot, but the movie makes up for that in my book to show us how to healthily navigate conflict in a family setting. This is probably the first time that I think I actually felt like this whole team was the Fantastic Four that we've all been waiting for. And even though I would agree that Vanessa Kirby's the MVP in this situation, the standout for me was Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm. This is a more subdued portrayal of that character, and he actually serves a purpose in helping defeat Galactus, with how he's able to connect with the Silver Surfer and make her see the error of her ways. And the whole retro 60s feel that we get from this makes it stand out from the rest of its counterparts in the MCU, similar to the first Captain America. Had a chance to rewatch this recently, and I can tell you for a fact, it still holds up for me, unlike with certain YouTubers on here. But yeah, I'm excited to see where this team goes in the future of the MCU, and hopefully we get a sequel one day. Number 2. This was a tough one. I kept going back and forth in which order to put these in. You know, if it gets me some flack for it, then okay, I'll accept it. But number 2 for me is Sinners by Ryan Coogler. I really don't know how else to articulate what I thought about Sinners. I've watched this a couple times in the months since then, and it still manages to impress me even more so than it did the previous time. Taking all the familiar settings and tropes that we've seen in other movies, from being in the Jim Crow era, the vampire genre, and a musical, and it's all done to tell its own story, showing us how that you don't have to be constrained by one way of life or the other. You can make your own choices, because in the long run, depending on what you do, it can actually be beneficial. This might be the best work that I've ever seen from Michael B. Jordan. Jack O'Connell as Remick? Yeah. I mean that in a good way. And even now, almost a year later, I still listen to that version of Rocky Road to Dublin. I even have it on my phone, along with a few other songs from the soundtrack. But to my surprise, this movie was a huge success at the box office, and I think a lot of other people felt the same. And I can easily see this being a modern classic for years to come. And now, number 1. You know what? I don't care if I'm gonna get hate for this. James Gunn's Superman. I know. That's a bold move on my part to make. I still stand by what I said about Christopher Reeve being the definitive version of Superman, but I think David Corenswet might actually be my favorite. The way they portray this character shows exactly what Superman is, that he's someone who cares about other people and wants to do good by others, while also wrestling with this newfound information about his Kryptonian heritage that doesn't sit well with him at first, but he has to be reminded that doesn't change who he is inside. This is probably the most gleefully fun comic book film that I've seen since the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man days. Perhaps even more so than any of the Guardians films that were also made by James Gunn. And it certainly doesn't make any apologies for being that way. But above all, it has heart. And it's something that Superman was lacking in film for a long time. Television might be a different story because I haven't watched the Superman and Lois show yet. I'm just saying in the movies, this is something that I think Superman desperately needed. And if nothing else, this movie made me finally realize why Superman is such a beloved character. That monologue he gives to Lex Luthor in the finale, well, here's how I reacted.
I wake up every morning and despite not knowing what to do, I put one foot in front of the other and I try to make the best choices I can. I screw up all the time, but that is being human. And that's my greatest strength.
Oh, that's beautiful. But none of this matters, you patronizing clown. And while I still am a Marvel fan first and foremost, this Superman film gave me more hope for DC going forward. And I'm very curious to see where this universe is going to go. So that's my list for 2025. Thank you guys so much for sticking around throughout 2025 with me. For what it's worth, it's been a hell of a ride. I hope and pray that I've managed to create somewhat of a safe haven for you guys, because the internet, as well as the real life, it can be a really shitty place. So I made a decision a long time ago to not cave into certain extremes on either side when it comes to discourse on entertainment. Haven't gotten it right all the time, but for what it's worth, I'm doing my best. And that's enough for me. Thanks again, guys. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are of 2025. And if you'd like to see more from me, just hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.